Rosh Hashanah's in the house tonight. All the world is passing through the light. Let's all get written in the book of life. Shana Tova, it's holiday time.
Hello, welcome to the Laws of Rosh Hashanah. We're just starting Tuf Kuf Pei Vav, Siman Tuf Kuf Pei Vav, 586 for those following along. If not, please enjoy just listening. Okay. Shofar Shal Rosh Hashanah, Mitzvah So B'Shal Ayal. There's a special mitzvah to blow the shofar of Rosh Hashanah with specifically a ram's horn. V'kafuf, and bent. It should be bent. Ub'diavad, and if you don't have that, Kol ha-shofaros ksherim, all shofars are kosher. There's a special mitzvah to do it with a ram's horn, and that it should be bent. But b'diavad, if you don't have that, bein b'shutim, bein kfufim, whether it's straight or bent, mitzvah b'kfufim yosem b'shutim. It's more of a mitzvah to do when it's bent than if it's straight. Obviously, straight would just be like this, and bent would be like that. V'shal para pasel b'chol gavna. However, the horn of a cow, from the cow species, that doesn't work at all. Also, most of the animals that their horns are just really bone, they're not hollow in the middle, all of those types of horns to use as a shofar, they don't work at all. V'chein shofar mebehema tmei pasul. The shofar from an unclean animal, from a non-kosher animal, is also not kosher for blowing the shofar. Okay, so let's see the Mishnah Berurah here. Shal Rosh Hashanah la'afuke b'taina shetoken gam kem b'shofar lo bin shel ayav kafuf. Because there's other times we actually blow the shofar. When there's a fast day, they used to blow shofar on fast days because they used to fast. Let's say if there was no rain and there was no food, so they would decree a special fast day. And on that fast day, they would blow a shofar. So on those fast days, when you blow the shofar, there's no special mitzvah to have a ram's horn which is bent. That's specifically on Rosh Hashanah. B'shal ayil, a ram's horn, lezecher akedas Yitzchak. Why do we want a ram's horn? To remember the binding of Isaac. Ubechlal zegam kivshin nekeva, also a female sheep. Elda madrina b'yoser nogim lachzor achar shal ayil dafka. We want specifically a ram. That's the best. Tehu zecher tfei la'ayil shel Yitzchak. It's more of a remembrance when we have something that's as similar as possible to the ram of Isaac, where, of course, the story we know is that Abraham was commanded to bring his son up as a sacrifice, and at the last moment an angel called out to him and said, "Don't kill your son," and he saw a ram stuck in the thicket, and he slaughtered that instead. So blowing the ram's horn reminds Hashem, how Abraham, who was the epitome of kindness, was willing to go against his nature because God had commanded it. So we all have that in our DNA, our spiritual DNA, to have the ability to go against our natural inclinations to serve Hashem. So we want to, quote unquote, remind Hashem of that and awaken that mercy. So we want to have a shofar that's as similar as possible to the shofar that was in the story. V'kafuf should be bent. Why should it be bent? As a sign symbolizing that our hearts should be bent in front of Hashem, subservient to Hashem. B'diavad kol shofros, we said that any shofar works b'diavad. Wrote Sulaymer afilu shel shar behemos achayos, of other animals. Mikol makom b'ishal shofar shel tayish. If you have a shofar of a tayish, which they translate as a billy goat or a nanny goat, va'ez yakdimen l'shofar shel ye'elim, that should be before an ibex. That's what they translate ye'elim as. I'm not sure what an ibex is, but for those of you that are into animals, I'm sure you'll know. U'min chaya v'shar chayos. Because those things, the billy goat is closer to a sheep or a ram. Okay, we want a ben shofar. Not only the ram's horn is it better to get a bent one over a straight one, but if you have a choice between any two shofars, even if it's not of a ram, you should get a bent one. The mechaber here is not explaining everything, every aspect. So he says here, so we know it's better to get a ram's horn and it's better to get a bent horn. What if you have this? These are your options. You have a straight ram's horn and you have a bent horn of another animal. So what's better? So it says here, Achena Maskanas Roma Poskim, most of the Poskim hold the Milos Kafafadav, it's actually better to get a bent shofar. If you have the ibex one that's bent and you have a sheep one that's straight, go with the bent one. Because the rabbis instituted that we get a bent horn to show that our heart should be bent towards Hashem during davening. The rabbis actually never instituted a law straight up to blow with a ram's horn. But really, it's just a custom that the Jewish people took upon themselves to get a ram's horn because it reminds us of the Akedah. So, to actually get a bent shofar, that is something that the rabbis actually instituted, whereas a shofar that is of a ram, that's just a custom that develops. So, if you have a choice to get a bent one of another animal or a straight one of a ram, you should go with the bent one. But even blowing, right, but still blowing with a ram's horn is a beautification of the mitzvah. We call makom kaso mavarjin, but the rabbi is right. But there's a law of hider mitzvah, that is a mitzvah to beautify a mitzvah, right? When you buy a lulav, you should get a nice lulav. So the same thing applies, that if you have a choice, he's going to say, Valkain, im avakshim imenu lahosif el shofar shel ayil, yosef ad shlish, okay, eno avur lekaman b'simen tuf reish nun vav. That you should pay for it. If they want to charge you more, up to a third, to get a ram's horn versus a horn of another animal, you should pay a third because it's a beautification of the mitzvah. Okay, shel paro, but we said we can't blow a shofar of a cow. V'hu adin shor, the same rule applies about a bull. V'tam ibnei shenikru karen v'lo shofar. It's called really, I know I kept saying horn, but here it says karen, it's called a karen and not a shofar. It's called a horn and not a shofar. The difference is it's just really a bone. The karen is just like a bone, it seems, and the shofar is hollowed out. So even if you would take that bone and hollow out the bone, it wouldn't work. The antelope, the tzvim, and the gedel, kedaima. And he says here, the reason that it's puzzle, it doesn't work, because the shofar has to be empty inside. Has to be hollow. The shofar, and this fact that it doesn't work, that a bone that isn't hollow doesn't work as a shofar, even if you were to hollow it out, that's actually a Torah law. Vafilu ein lo shofar. That means even if you don't have another shofar, ein lo tko b'hem, you just have this cow shofar, that someone took a bone of a cow's horn and hollowed it out, such a shofar, you're not fulfill the mitzvah, you might as well be blowing the trumpet. V'chein shofar mebehemet tamea. Also, we said a shofar from a non-kosher animal you shouldn't use. Ukamod lo huchshrut tefillin la'asos me'or behemet tamea. So too, when you make tefillin, you can't make tefillin from a non-kosher animal. Because Achronim, the latter-day rabbis write, she'ein din zabar. He said this law is not so clear. So if you don't have another shofar, let's say the only shofar you have is a shofar from a non-kosher animal. I'm not definitely not a zoologist, so I don't know what type of non-kosher animals would have shofars, but whatever it is, and that's the only shofar you can find somehow. So he said you should still blow it, avalo yivarich, but don't make a bracha on it. The shemahu pasal medina, because maybe according to the letter of the law it doesn't work. So anytime you're doing a mitzvah and you're not sure if the mitzvah should work, but there's a possibility, so do it because you have nothing really to lose. However, don't make a blessing, because if you make a blessing and it turns out you're not doing the mitzvah, then you made a blessing in vain, which is a sin. Now let's say you had this shofar from a non-kosher animal, and then all of a sudden, so you blow with it and you don't make a bracha, but then someone brings you, your friend comes and he says, look, I have a ram's horn for you to blow. So you should blow that ram's horn, so you can fulfill the mitzvah for sure. But gamkein below bracha, but you should also do it without a blessing. The shema kfar yatsa, the shofar harishin, because maybe you already fulfilled your obligation with the first shofar. And he concludes by saying that a shofar of an animal which was not slaughtered properly, it's kosher. You don't need to slaughter an animal for the shofar. Slaughtering is only for eating. Or a treifa. A treifa is an animal that has certain blemishes within it that will shorten its lifespan. Such a shofar is totally kosher. So just to summarize, we said the best shofar to have on Rosh Hashanah is a ram's horn which is bent. The reason we want a ram's horn is to remind us of the binding of Isaac, and the reason we want it bent is to show that we're subjugating our hearts, bending our hearts to Hashem during davening. And we said, however, if you have another shofar of another animal, or that it's straight, that's fine, except for animals like a cow, where it's not really a shofar, which is hollow, but it's really a bone. That doesn't work at all. So there's no point of blowing that at all. And we said we said that, but if you have a shofar from a non-kosher animal, you should still blow it, but don't make the blessing. And if someone were to bring you a regular shofar of a ram, then you should blow it. And with that, we'll conclude for the day.